the modification of a designated assured water supply application to the Arizona Department of Water Resources. An active designation of assured water supply is necessary for Peoria to continue to grow. Staff have been working diligently to prepare this year's submission and preserve the public's trust in the city's water supply. David Burks, our Water Services Director, along with Brett Fleck, our Water Policy Advisor, and Jenna Norris, our Water Resources Policy Analyst, sorry, Jenna, will present the action needed from Council tonight to maintain the city's designation of a 100-year assured water supply. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Darwin. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. In June, you approved the contract award to begin the Northern Wellfield and Booster Station project. The purpose of the project was to secure a redundant water supply for Northern Peoria. Tonight, we're here to talk about the City of Peoria's 100-year Assured Water Supply Designation renewal, which directly correlates to the Northern Wellfield project. Brett Fleck, our Water Resources Advisor, and Jenna Norris, our Water Resources Analyst, are here to walk you through the 100-year Assured Water Supply application process. With no further ado, go ahead, Mr. Fleck.
Thank you, David. Mayor and Council, I was last in front of you in August for a water resources and water quality update. We talked about major news items, challenges, solutions, and choices this council will have to make over the coming years. Tonight, we're here to talk about perhaps the most important way that the city demonstrates its commitment to water security through long-range planning, investment, and overcoming any of those challenges. And that's known as our 100-year designation of assured water supply. As we approach the end of the current designation period, it's time to submit the application to update and extend it. My very capable colleague here, Ms. Jenna Norris, has led this project, so I'll hand it off to her to explain more.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having me. It's my first time in front of you tonight. And without further ado, let's talk about a designation of assured water supply and how it applies specifically to Peoria. So a designation of assured water supply is a rigorous regulatory framework that's administered by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and it ensures that urban development has available supply that outweighs the demand of that development. It's a holistic look at the total demand and the total supply available to meet that demand. Specifically for Peoria and all other designated cities, we need to be able to demonstrate that when we forecast all of the growth within our water service area over the next 10 years, that the current and those future demands can be covered by primarily renewable supplies that will be available for at least the next 100 years. And so Peoria is in good shape to meet this requirement. You might all be familiar with this pie chart on your screen here. You've seen it before, I believe. It shows that we have a diverse water resources supply portfolio here at the city, and it has a lot of renewable supplies within it. So we have CAP water, SRP, and stored water throughout our city. So that covers from a high level what a designation is, but why we are in front of you tonight specifically is because as part of this upcoming designation application, we have to have a resolution from council in order for our city manager, Mr. Henry Darwin, to actually sign and submit the application. And so tonight I'm going to be briefing you on why this designation is so important to the city and give you a high-level look at what that upcoming submission will look like. So covering the what, the next really important question is why. So giving some history, this program was born out of the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. And that 1980 Groundwater Management Act was crafted in response to rapidly declining groundwater levels throughout the valley. At the time, it was largely due to overmining of groundwater from agricultural demands. And this was causing land subsidence as well as other concerns. And so the Assured Water Supply Program was crafted as a way to prevent urban growth on more groundwater and further exacerbate this issue, and instead require that urban growth be reliant on renewable supply, or if it were to be reliant on groundwater, that groundwater be replenished with a renewable supply. So try to bring more balance and have those groundwater levels rise. So this program functionally has meant that the most populous areas of the state have had the most robust water resource planning requirements really of all of our western neighbors throughout the western states. And for the past 40 years, it's provided pretty unparalleled consumer protection for not only residents of City of Peoria, but also businesses, and continues to promote long-term supply planning. So in fact, the program is so important to City of Peoria that it was included in our Principles of Sound Water Management, and it's required that we maintain this designation as part of that document. And so Peoria residents can be certain that the city is constantly projecting and planning, and most importantly, investing to be sure that we can continue to maintain this designation. So it's a hefty submission, hundreds of pages, and as part of that, you have to prove that you can demonstrate compliance with these 7 key components. They're all on your screen, but I'm really just going to talk you through those top 3, as those are the 3 that are the most robust and scrutinized by the state. So you need to show that you have the physical, legal, and continuous availability of this supply portfolio. So physical availability is exactly as it sounds. You have to show that that supply is physically accessible to you for the next 100 years at least. Legal, again, it's pretty straightforward as it sounds, that you have a legal right to the water that you're including in this submission. And then finally, continuous means that the volume you include needs to be available in that amount continuously over the 100 years. So now that you all have a decent picture, hopefully, of what a designation is and why it matters, it's important to know that this is certainly not Peoria's first time undergoing this process. We have a long history with our designations, and Brett is going to walk you through where we were prior and where we're going.
So as Jenna said before, the 1980 Groundwater Management Act laid the foundation for the water laws that we built our city and really central Arizona on. The assured water supply is a cornerstone of the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. After an initial period, Peoria applied to modify and extend its initial designation in 1997, that's that first block at the top, that designated the city as having an assured water supply for 100 years or through 2097. A common misperception of the 100-year assured water supply program is that things fall apart in year 101. But in fact, the program requires continual modification and reproving at defined intervals so that changes to supply and demand are taken into account, providing enough reaction time to address any challenges that might be far out on the horizon. Peoria's current designation was awarded in 2010, shifting that 100-year window forward. The key takeaway of this slide, of course, repeated 3 times, is the planning period is always 100 years. We are now preparing to submit the application that will extend our designation through 2125. So now I'll pass it back to Jenna to talk about how the balance of supply and demand looks for this application that we plan on submitting by the year end.
Okay, so demand. There's a few key points when thinking about the demand component of the application. The first is that the growth planning period is for 10 years. For this submission, it will be from 2025 to 2035. And the forecasting for that period is based off of year-over-year growth uses from the Integrated Water Resources Master Plan data update, also called the IWAMP often. The second thing you might notice is that the demand for SRP and the demand off project or non-SRP has to be divvied up. And the reason for this is because SRP water is only legally able to be used on SRP lands. And so for this submission, you have to ensure that that supply meets that demand. So although Peoria's demand in 2035 might not exactly mirror these 2 bold figures that you see on your screen, it's important that we're planning and prepared for future growth. And these estimates are certainly realistic, but also conservative enough to allow. With that being said, the 2 numbers to key in on here is that in 2035, we're projecting that SRP demand will be about 12,000 acre feet or 3.9 billion gallons, and that off-project demand in 2035 will be about 44,000 acre feet or about 14 billion gallons. So I hope that maybe what you've begun to take from this presentation is that if you were to really boil a designation down in its essence, it's a math equation, a simple one. It's that you need to make sure that your supply outweighs your demand. And so this table here in front of you shows what our supply is, and it carries over those numbers that we just saw on the last slide. And so you'll see the SRP supply is about 15,000, a little bit more than that. And again, the SRP demand projected for 2035 is about 12,000. So that's good news. There's more SRP supply than there is projected demand. Moving down in the table, you'll see the CAP supply, our reclaimed supply, long-term storage credits, and a little bit of groundwater, all components of that pie chart that you saw on the first slide. Adding all of those up, it's about 46,000 acre feet of supply. And again, good news, the 2035 projected demand is about 43,000. Of course, that's not by happenstance, that's because we've been planning and preparing. So we are prepared to successfully apply for a modification of designation. We believe we can demonstrate that we have the physical, legal, and continuous availability of renewable supplies for at least 100 years to meet the city's demands in 2035. And so as we come to the end of this presentation, I'm going to give it back over to Brett to close us out and talk about what this means for Peoria now and also looking forward.
As Jenna has shown today, Peoria is in good shape for our next 10-year designation period, and maybe beyond. One of our most important duties in water resources is to ensure the city is prepared for the application after that, and frankly, the one after that. So we're always looking out until, in this case, 2035. There are a number of items that are on our radar, of course, Colorado River issues that you read about in the news, growth in water demand as our city continues to grow and mature, and developing and securing new supplies such as reclaimed water or perhaps from an expanded Bartlett Dam, for example. We've already begun making the necessary investments to be prepared for the next designation period, but more will be required over the decade. It's important to remember that the demand and the supply figures that Jenna showed earlier are not fixed, and they can be changed with policies and investments in things like water conservation, resources, and infrastructure. Given how long it takes for these things to come to fruition, we're often making decisions 10, 15, 20 years in advance of when they're actually needed. So as long as we keep planning as far ahead as we have been and investing when necessary, Peoria's water supply will remain secure. So with that, I'll pivot back to the primary reason that we're here today. As Jenna said up front, state regulation requires that the City Council pass a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign and submit the application by the end of this month. The proposed resolution is the culmination of all of the planning and investment that this and past councils have made to prepare us for what we believe will be a successful application to maintain Peoria's 100-year designation of assured water supply. With that, we'll take any questions.
Any questions from council? Councilor Patena?
Thank you, Mayor. I was at a Lions Club meeting today, and I'm not trying to throw a curveball to you guys, but I was at a Lions Club meeting today, and there was a gentleman there that was very factual. A lot of information about water. He said in order to have access to the water for the city for 10 years, you have to drill down 50 feet to get the groundwater. He said in order to provide water for the next 100 years, you have to drill down 1,500 feet. Is that even factual, or is that something you know about? And if you don't, I'm okay with that.
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Patena, I can speak to that a little bit. So in the city of Peoria, unless you're right along the Agua Fria riverbed, there's not really anywhere in the city where the water is 50 feet below our feet. It's much deeper. I think our average well depth is over 300 feet as far as where the water sits if you drill a well. For city production wells, we are routinely drilling to 1,000 or more feet to ensure that we can access water over time. So there's quite a bit of groundwater accessible to the city between the average depth in the 300 feet range down to over 1,000 feet. So there is a correlation certainly between how deep you drill and you know where the water level is at and how much you've taken out. But from drawing a straight line between 50 feet to 1,000 feet over 100 years, for example, I think is maybe an oversimplification.
He might have been trying to put a straw in the Aqua Fria.
That would be a good place if you want to go to 50 feet. I'm not a hydrologist, for the record.
Yeah.
Sure, you're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Nope. All right. Do I have a motion to pass 25R?
So moved, Mayor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 6-0.